Good morning. Today we are going to talk about poverty. What's meant by absolute poverty? As we said last time, that poverty can be measured as a relative poverty or absolute poverty. Last time we talked about relative poverty. Today we are going to talk about absolute poverty. Absolute poverty is a situation in which people experience actual hardship according to some objective criterion. It's commonly measured by poverty line. What's meant by a poverty line? A poverty line is a level of income below which a household is considered poor. It covers basic needs for survival, such as food, clothing, housing, etc. So here in the calculation of poverty line, as we said, we have to determine an income level to cover the basic needs. But in calculation of income, we take money income. We take money income, which covers government income transfers. As we said last time, in case of relative poverty, that there are a number of factors that have to be included in income and the others are not included or not counted. So in this case, we are going to take into consideration government income transfers. What are the main problems with poverty line, with measuring poverty line? Number one, this indicator magnifies the true extent of poverty. as it ignores the receipt of in-kind transfers. Number two, when adjusting poverty line for inflation, we are going to use consumer price index. This will overstate the extent of inflation and hence will affect the extent or overestimate the extent of poverty as well. Number three, calculation of household income is before tax, not after tax. But actually, taxes are going to be deducted from this income later on. So, in order to measure poverty, after income tax should be counted, not before income tax. So, these are the three main problems associated with the measurement of poverty line. What are the incidents of poverty? Incidence means distribution. So it's equally important not to know the number of people below the poverty line, but to know the distribution of poverty within the country. There are two different ways to look at the distribution of of poverty within the country. Both of them are correct, but they are from different perspectives or dimensions. Number one is to determine who the poor are. According to these criteria, we have to determine what share of nations poor are represented by various groups of people. So here we are going to talk about composition of poverty. Number two, looking at the share of each group of people that is poor. This means that we are going to divide population based on age, family type, race. So say, for example, based on age. So number of poor people in each group, 14.1 million, say 14.1 million, 22.1, 3.7. As a percentage of poor in the nation, it will be 35%, 56%, and 9%. This is the case of who are the poor, or based on the first way of distribution. Based on the second way, if you are going to take the same groups, age under 18, from 18 to 64, from 65 and over. Okay, this is poverty rate. It will be 19%, 11.7%, 9.7%. So this is the share of each group that is poor. But in the first case, it is the share of number of poor people in the population. So they are not equivalent to each other. What are the implications of poverty? Number one, hunger. Actually, the problem of bread for the wallet. This is in order to overcome the problem of hunger, or to solve the problem, the hunger issue worldwide. Number two, homelessness. Number three, health care, adequate health care. Actually, poor people are not covered by Medicaid, and suffers from absence of Medicare. What's meant by Medicaid and Medicare? Medicaid means a government program providing medical coverage for eligible low income people. While Medicare is a government program providing medical coverage largely to elderly people. So due to spread of poverty, there is no Medicaid or Medicare. Also, there is an important problem which is related to poverty, which is feminization of poverty. This means that women bear the greatest burden of poverty. What is the main reason behind that? Number one, the growth in the number of female headed households. Teenage pregnancies. Discrimination in the labor market. Domestic violence toward women. Teenage girls drop out rate. So feminization of poverty is highly associated with poverty, especially in developing countries. What are the causes of poverty? Number one, recession. Recession means a decline in the country's output or gross domestic product. This will be associated with an increase in unemployment rate. As during the recession, people are not going to demand goods and services, so factories are going to lay workers off, so unemployment rate is going to increase. Number two, poor labor productivity. People with few skills, limited experience, little education have a difficulty in finding a job. As a result, this is going to affect the poverty rates and wage rate. Number three, structural changes in the economy. Technological change mainly has enabled machine to replace workers. So this is number one, technological change. We are going to use machine instead of worker. So workers are going to be laid off, unemployment rate is going to increase, wages are going to decrease, and poverty is going to widely spread. Number two, low wage service sector. Due to number of factors such as poor labor productivity or technological change, may people may try to find a job in service sector, but the service sector, the wage in service sector is lower compared to any other sector, so this is also will help to widespread of poverty. Number four, personal factors. If we are going to talk about personal factors, this means readiness, job readiness. People may lack of readiness because of mental disability, inexperience, immaturity, or any other factor. Number five, budget cuts. Many people believe that government spends on enormous amount of programs in order to improve conditions for the poor, but these programs are ineffective programs. So they support the idea that government programs for the poor should be cut. Number six, aspects of labor market within the economy. This is related to percentage of uh, labor force out of total population, structure of labor force, percentage of women in the labor force, etc. What are the possible solutions for this problem or for problem of poverty? Number one, at the macro level, so there are macroeconomic policies should be taken in order to overcome the problem. These macroeconomic policies are directed toward decreasing unemployment rate. Okay, so here we are going to talk about fiscal policy and monetary policy. That will help to increase employment or job creation. Number two, at the micro level, this is directed toward improving labor productivity. So this is related to how to solve the problem of low labor productivity, structural changes in the economy. So here we are going to talk about investment in human capital. Investment in human capital means spending that improves the productivity of labor. Spending on education and job training in order to improve the skills and ability of worker and hence make them more productive. Number three, negative income tax. And this is like a redistribution of income from between the rich and the poor, as the government is going to impose taxes on high income people. And pays money for low income people. Number four, make sure that the nation provide equal opportunities to all people. Equal opportunities in terms of education, housing, employment, financing Number 5, financing public education. This is in order to make sure of the quality of education for all children. Also, housing programs and healthcare programs should be directed to the needs of the poor. This is the end of our lecture today. Thank you and see you next week.